Hi, this is Emily Freitag, and I'm very, very pleased to be joined today by Marcus Whitney, who, full disclosure, is a board member of Instruction Partners and a friend, and a pioneer in healthcare entrepreneurship, and prior to this chapter of his career, a pioneer in internet. And I'm going to let him describe what internet means to him and what it should mean to all of us. But I wanted to bring Marcus into this conversation because we've had an ongoing dialogue that has been really thought-provoking to me about just what world we are preparing children for and what that means for our job in K-12 education. And so Marcus, welcome to Rethinking Intervention.
Emily, thanks for having me.
So why don't you start with your own story a little bit and then just take us right into what that leads you to be thinking about these days.
Yeah, I think to make it very, very relevant to your audience and to this conversation, I arrived in Nashville 20 years ago, married young, 24 years old, with a 1-year-old, and my wife was pregnant, and I was a college dropout. And so the first jobs I had when I moved here were waiting tables. I was living in a week-to-week motel, and that was 6.5 days a week, waiting tables, and then going home to that hotel to try to be dad. And pretty quickly came to the conclusion that that was just not going to work long term for pretty obvious reasons. And I'm in a city where I don't know anybody. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I met my wife in Atlanta, my ex-wife in Atlanta. And so had to sort of think outside of the box. What am I going to be able to do? What am I going to be able to do with no credentials, no network to change my socioeconomic status? What I remembered was that when I was 9 or 10 years old, my uncle worked for IBM in upstate New York, and he bought me an IBM PC Junior. And back then, computers were really, really not very powerful. And so anything you wanted them to do, you had to program them to do. And so I learned some basic programming, and I remember messing around with Texas Instruments 99 and all that kind of stuff. And so I was just like, look, it's the year 2000. I didn't know then, but it was the end of the dot-com boom. And I'm seeing high school students who hadn't graduated from high school being hired by companies, being paid $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, riding around in offices on skateboards, programming. And I'm like, if they can do it, then certainly I can figure this out. So I started buying books, started teaching myself how to code. This was in between tables or in the brief moments I had at home when I wasn't taking care of the kid. And over the course of 8 months, the day after my second son was born, I got a salaried programming job at a company here in Nashville called HealthStream. And that was a massive, massive socioeconomic shift, probably the biggest one in my entire life. For your viewers who don't know much about me, I'm now a venture capitalist. I'm a minority owner of a Major League Soccer team. I've exited tech companies. So I've had some nice things happen on the economic side. Nothing comes close to going from being a waiter to making $45,000 a year as a programmer. And I think the reason why that is relevant to this conversation is I taught myself with books and grit, just having a computer and having access to the internet. And the skill that I learned was how the internet actually works. So I was a professional programmer for 7 years, but during those 7 years, I transitioned from being a junior programmer to a mid-level to a senior programmer to a director of technology managing people to an equity holding partner of a fast-growing startup company. And I was able to learn management, learn leadership, but my skill set around understanding how the internet worked was the foundation for that rapid growth in my career. I haven't really programmed professionally since 2007, but everything I've done since then has greatly depended on and leveraged my knowledge of how the internet works. And that is because it's a superpower in a world where most people don't understand how the internet works. They learn a couple of software packages here and there, but they can't really see how business models are going to be changed, how, I think a lot of people didn't see how we were going to be able to evolve in a moment like this, because they weren't really aware of the state of the technology that we had available to us. And we're not even at like 5G levels yet, right? You know what I mean? And so, my entire life for the last 20 years is largely based on learning internet. And so that's probably the best way I can sort of lead into the conversation we're going to have.
Super helpful. So bring us in on the internet. As a lay person myself, but also likely, like most of our country, kind of a lay audience. I might know that I depend on it, but still not really understand it. Bring us in on kind of the power it is holding over all of us and how it's changing.
Yeah. So as a matter of human invention and things that connect the entire human race, other than language and money, internet's probably the biggest invention in the history of humanity.
Maybe music, but yeah.
Yeah. Music probably up there. But internet is huge. It is a very robust set of protocols that were very intelligently designed to enable two parties to engage in the sharing of data from anywhere in the world. And as we started to say, if it could do this, it could do that, it could do this, it could do that, we realized that it started with, let's share secret documents back when it was, DARPANET and it was the Department of Defense. Then it moved into the academic space and it turned into research papers. And then, if we just sort of fast forward quite a bit, it turned into marketing websites and turned into media. Now, as we've learned what we can turn into ones and zeros, you and I are having this conversation pretty much real time. We can't even tell there's a lag, right? Across the internet. And that is obviously very, very powerful. Now, the key is, how does it actually work? I could turn this whole thing into a lecture about how it works, but that's not as important as saying people who understand how it works aren't just utilizing it, they're engineering it. And there's tremendous power in engineering it. And when I say engineering, I don't even mean that they're engineering it at a code level. It could be as high level as stitching together several tools, because you understand where the integration points are between the tools, and you understand how the tools actually exist and they work enough that you can take two tools and make a new tool with a new application, with a new purpose. And if you look at the way that things have played out economically during this pandemic, it's really clear that in a moment where physical proximity has been basically eradicated, right? I mean, we keep trying to figure out how to do it, but we can't ultimately. The internet isn't just helpful; it's an absolute utility. And because it's got this utility nature, it grows in value, it grows in importance. And I think we really understand just how digitally illiterate so many people are in a moment like this, right? Where they can't be as productive in a world where they can't touch people. But this is the reality. The internet is the real world. It's like I saw the headline the other day about us having a change shortage. And I just found it kind of funny, because it's like, I only spend digital dollars these days. You know what I mean? Like, change is, I don't know, it's something I make art with or something. You know what I mean? It's not like
cute.
Yeah, it's cute. Exactly. It's cute. But the sad thing is, if someone, and there are people who are operating still primarily with paper cash and metal coins, they're not operating in the world today. They're operating in a past world. And I think what you want to talk about is how internet has not really been made a first-class citizen in the pantheon of what we teach children
Yes.
today. And what a massive disservice that is.
Yes.
20 years ago, it was an incredible lever up for me. Like it has given me a real unfair advantage in the world from a productivity perspective, from a research perspective, from a commerce perspective, from a marketing perspective. Every way you can kind of think of that has to do with my professional career, and even more, even like my, managing my family, taking care of myself, taking care of my health. In all of these ways, because I understand the internet and I'm hyper literate in it, I have an advantage over somebody who's not. So now, we're moving to a full-on virtual world in some cases here in Nashville. Metro Nashville Public Schools is, starting out at least in 100% virtual. We have to scramble to get devices. We have to scramble to get digital access. If you have to scramble for those things, that means these families are ill-equipped already, just as a baseline for what the world is today, what it is right now. The most valuable companies in the world, the conglomerates of 2020, are innovative technology companies. They're not the oil, finance, energy companies, that you and I grew up with. The Exxons and the GEs and the, those companies are not the biggest companies anymore. It's Apple, it's Alphabet, it's Amazon, it's Facebook, it's Microsoft, right? And that's the present, and it's also the future. So why are we not teaching young people TCP/IP, the fundamental protocol of the internet, so they can understand the addresses, and they can understand packet routing, and they can understand the basic communication structure that happens between two devices? Like, I know what's happening in this conversation.
I have no idea.
That's
I'm like, I got a camera and I'm looking at you.
Right, exactly. But you could learn it. See, here's the sad thing. All I would have to do is say, go look up RTMP, right? Real-time media protocol. And you just get a Wikipedia page and you read it. There it is. Now you understand. This is just a protocol. There's
a little bit of a language. Like, I tried to read the internet Wikipedia, and it was like when I was early learning German, and I couldn't even really understand what a sentence meant. So I think there is a little bit of a we talk a lot in our reading subjects around foundational skills, so that you can get access to reading, so that you can then read to understand. Feels to me like there's a foundational skills equivalent for internet that I need to start with.
Yeah, I think that's right. And if I were to
decoding, we call it, right? So
if I were to start that, I would say the important things to understand about the internet are data packets and protocols. Those are the two most important things to understand.
So it's not just to stamp this, it's not coding. Because I think there is a conversation in education about, we need to teach more children how to code. But I think you're pointing to a different body of knowledge.
I'm pointing to something lower level than that. I'm pointing to something lower level than that, because with the lower level knowledge, you then have a much better understanding of the implications of broadband. Internet, and you understand why today we can actually cut the cord with cable, whereas 10 years ago we kind of couldn't do it. And it wasn't just about the bandwidth; it was also about the data packets and the algorithms that were able to get the things we see. The things we see are digital. They're not analog. So it's a bunch of ones and zeros that get pushed across a wire or a satellite or whatever, right, to an end destination. And when they are received, then there's something on the other end that receives it and processes it
and puts it back together.
Yeah, and puts it back together. But it's when it when it's from here to there, it takes different routes. It gets splattered into lots of different things, and it comes back together, reorganized, and presented to the other person, right?
I feel like you're talking to me about like Willy Wonka and the kid who became the candy bar that traveled through space.
Yeah, but this is science, right? I mean, these are things that like this is computer science. These are things that when you hear them on the surface, they seem really crazy, but they're just science.
It's learnable.
It's learnable.
Yeah. And so one more point before we talk about like how could we do this? Because I feel like we could mind meld that a little bit. But I still just want to kind of really understand, like, because you're essentially positing, I think, that we need a different pantheon of courses, or a different hierarchy of what we're actually valuing in the K-12 curriculum, which I think is right. So the world that students are going to graduate in are ready, like not a far distant world, the one they're graduating into right now, and likely only more so as time goes on, is dominated by the internet. Today.
Not tomorrow.
Right.
Today. How much time do we spend on this thing or this screen? Right. This is a right now thing.
This is right now. It's here already. This is not like we need to think about this into the future. Right. No. And so take us into what that means for power. You've told us about it in your own story, but it's like people who know how to organize the internet.
Look, if anyone has watched the most recent antitrust hearing that happened with the House Judiciary Committee with, the big tech CEOs, or has seen previous Senate hearings where Zuckerberg would have to show up, it's pretty clear that the people who are in the House and in the Senate, by and large, with some exceptions, don't understand how the internet works. So they can't regulate it because they don't understand it. They're asking questions, and like everyone who works in tech watches those things and is scared to death because they're either going to completely miss the thing they're supposed to regulate, or they're going to way over regulate and like, hamper our ability to be competitive as a country. You know what I mean? And this is really, really, really scary stuff because the internet is moving so much faster than our society's willingness to adjust learning. That's what I'm fundamentally saying. So just for context, I've said I had, a 1-year-old and the kid was being born. Fast forward, my kids are now 21 and 19. And where this really hit me was when my 19-year-old, who is smart in computers, was taking his ACTs, and I just thought about the topics he was taking, and I was just like, you're not answering any questions about the internet on these tests, are you? And the answer is no.
Right.
He's not answering any questions about the internet. The internet is everywhere. It's everything, and we're not answering any questions about it. Who are we preparing to inherit the world? And the reason why power dynamics are so important is if our education system isn't doing it, then the only people that are getting it are families that can afford to, on top of what the education system provides, do that extra step, or people who end up in this small band of companies that are driving the internet. Right? They get to fully understand it, but that sounds like elitism to me.
Well, I think you've said more strongly than that. There will be people who run the internet and people who serve them.
There already are. I mean, this is already the deal.
So it's almost a new form of slavery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to be careful about that word, but look, Apple and Amazon in particular, those two companies, are very, very different companies than we've ever seen in the history of humanity, right? Insofar as they're not state operated companies, and they're in the $1 trillion value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is they're more powerful than most countries
Mm-hmm.
in the world today. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're already there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certainly true that these companies do need oversight and they do need to be more regulated, but our leadership isn't capable of doing it. And so, in light of that, and when they are delivering such a better value proposition than the companies that don't have internet embedded in their DNA,
Mm-hmm.
consumers in a capitalist society, consumers are going to vote for the company that best serves them. We're not going to vote to regulate Amazon when they saved America during the pandemic, quite frankly. We're just not going to do it. And what are we going to miss when that's happening? Right? How many companies are they going to steal intellectual property from, and we don't do anything about it? Because we give them all their data. I mean, I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm just saying they have that much control. Everyone's stuff is running on Amazon web servers. It's like, you know what I mean? Everyone's selling through Amazon's marketplace. I mean, this is kind of a new deal.
Yeah. It's here already.
It's here.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this conversation so much. I don't know how we do it exactly on the K-12 side. I don't know what the curriculum looks like or what grades it gets introduced at or where the standards need to come from. And I don't even know, frankly, that much about what exists currently. I know that there are pushes for coding in particular in a lot of places, but I certainly know that we in K-12 are not treating this like we treat mathematics or reading. And yet I know how dependent my life is on it, which means we should be.
It's a huge miss. It's a huge miss. Yeah. So, I would just implore people to think about how much of their current life depends on the internet. And I know what they want to sort of say is, oh, well, let's teach the kids Gmail, or let's teach the kids, let's teach them applications. And what I would say is the applications have changed year over year. You know what I mean? What has not changed is the protocols. Still using TCP/IP. We're still using HTTP and HTTPS. Now they get a little bit better. There's a worldwide working group that kind of improves them incrementally. But basically, these protocols have been the same for decades now, right? So if you want to teach young children to be able to access the truth of the internet in the same way that Amazon accesses it, that information has been here for decades. It's super rock solid, and it is not that complicated. You could teach it in grade school. I mean, when I say grade school, I don't know the proper
younger children. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the K-6 system, you could teach the foundations of internet. Absolutely could.
And build on it from there. I do think, there are some places I know that have pushed for this as like a language, but it's still in this elective place. And if ever there were a time that showed us how much we depend on it, we are in it now. Thank you, Marcus Whitney, for joining Rethinking Intervention. Appreciate the conversation.
Anytime, Emily.